Imagine this, a quiet room, heavy with unspoken tension, where two souls stand at the edge of their own unseen battlefields. One, the empath, carries a heart that absorbs the world's pain like a sponge, their inner light flickering under the weight of others' shadows. The other, the narcissist, wields a polished mask of grandeur, their fragile core hidden behind a fortress of self-admiration. In this silent collision, a subtle shift begins, a boundary, drawn a line etched in the sand. And with that single act, the empath's quiet strength begins to unravel the narcissist's carefully constructed world. What happens when the one who feels too much dares to say no more? What happens when the one who demands everything is met with refusal? In the interplay of these archetypes drawn from the deep wells of Carl Jung's wisdom lies a profound truth about human connection, power, and the courage to claim one's own soul. The empath in their essence is an archetype of the wounded healer, a figure who navigates the world with an almost unbearable sensitivity to its undercurrents. They are the ones who sense the unspoken grief in a stranger's eyes, who carry the weight of a friend's unvoiced fears. Their psyche, attuned to the collective unconscious, resonates with the pain and beauty of existence, often at the cost of their own boundaries. Jung would say, they are tethered to the anima, the soul's feminine principle, which seeks connection, empathy, and unity. Yet this gift is also their shadow, a tendency to dissolve into others, to lose the self in the act of giving. The narcissist, by contrast, embodies the inflated ego, a persona so consumed by its own reflection that it cannot see beyond the mirror. Jung might describe them as trapped in the grip of the puer aeternus, the eternal child forever seeking admiration to fill an inner void they dare not face. Their shadow is the fragility they deny, the deep fear of insignificance that drives their need for control. When these two meet, it is no mere coincidence. The collective unconscious orchestrates such encounters, pulling archetypes together to mirror and challenge each other's unhealed wounds. The empath, drawn to the narcissist's charisma, senses the pain beneath their bravado, believing they can heal it. The narcissist, in turn, sees the empath as a source of endless validation, a mirror to reflect their grandeur. But this dynamic is a dance of projection, where each sees in the other what they cannot yet face within themselves. The empath projects their own need for self-worth onto the narcissist's demands, while the narcissist projects their insecurity onto the empath's willingness to give. It is a cycle of mutual entrapment, a symbiotic illusion that can persist for years until the empath awakens. Consider this what stirs within you. When you give too much, when your heart bends under the weight of another's expectations. Do you feel the quiet ache of your own neglected boundaries? The whisper of a self you've left behind? The empath's journey toward setting boundaries is not merely an act of refusal. It is an act of individuation, Jung's term for the process of becoming whole. To say no is to reclaim the self from the collective, to draw a sacred circle around one's own soul. This act is revolutionary, for it disrupts the narcissist's carefully curated world. Their ego, built on the foundation of external validation, begins to tremble when the empath withdraws their endless supply of attention. The narcissist's mask so meticulously crafted cracks under the weight of this refusal, revealing the shadow they have long suppressed. This moment of boundary setting is not without pain. The empath, conditioned to prioritize others, may feel guilt, fear, or even grief as they step into their own power. The narcissist, confronted with the mirror of their own inadequacy, may lash out, manipulate, or retreat into victimhood. Yet this is where the alchemical transformation begins. Jung spoke of the shadow as the seat of creativity, the raw material of growth. For the empath, embracing their shadow means owning their right to exist without apology. For the narcissist, it means facing the vulnerability they have denied. The crumbling of the narcissist's world is not merely their downfall, it is an invitation to confront their own depths, to integrate the parts of themselves they have cast aside. But what does this mean for you watching this unfold? Have you ever felt the pull to sacrifice your own needs for another's approval? Have you ever sensed the fragility behind someone's grandiosity, yet stayed silent to keep the peace? The dance between empath and narcissist is not just their story. It is a universal one, etched in the archetypes of the human psyche. It asks you to look within to question where you have given too much, where you have demanded too much. The empath's boundary is a call to all of us to honor the self, to face the shadow, to step into the fullness of who we are meant to be. The empath's boundary, once set, ripples through the unseen threads of their connection with the narcissist, like a stone dropped into a still pond. This act of defiance, subtle yet seismic, disrupts the delicate balance of their dance. The empath, who has long been the giver, the healer, the one who bends, now stands firm, their heart no longer an open well for the narcissist's insatiable thirst. In this moment, the archetypes shift, and the collective unconscious stirs, as if the soul of the world itself is watching. The empath's refusal is not merely a personal act, it is a reclamation of power, a step toward individuation where the self begins to emerge from the fog of others' demands. Jung would see this as the hero's journey, where the empath, once lost in the labyrinth of self-sacrifice, begins to wield the sword of self-awareness. Yet this is no simple victory. The narcissist, whose identity hinges on the mirror of external validation, feels the ground beneath them tremble. Their ego, a towering structure built on the labor of others' attention, begins to fracture. Jung's concept of the persona, the mask we wear to face the world, is central here. The narcissist's persona is a masterpiece of illusion, a glittering facade that conceals a core of unworthiness they cannot bear to face. When the empath withdraws, the mirror dims, and the narcissist is left staring into the void of their own shadow. This shadow, as Jung taught, is not merely darkness, but the unacknowledged self, the fragile human part that longs for authentic connection, yet fears its vulnerability. The narcissist's response is often a storm of manipulation, rage, or feigned indifference, all desperate attempts to restore the status quo. But the empath's boundary, like a dam holding back a flood, refuses to yield. And what of you standing at the edge of this narrative? Have you ever felt the weight of someone's need pressing against your own desires, urging you to shrink so they might feel larger? The empath's struggle is a mirror for your own. It asks you to consider where you have allowed your boundaries to blur, where you have let another's voice drown out your own. Attachment theory woven into this Jungian tapestry offers insight here. The empath often carries an anxious attachment, a deep-seated fear of abandonment that drives them to please, to heal, to give beyond their limits. The narcissist, conversely, may lean toward avoidant attachment, cloaking their need for closeness in a veneer of self-sufficiency. Their dance is a collision of wounds, each seeking in the other what they cannot yet give themselves. The empath's boundary, then, is an act of courage, a refusal to let their wound define them. It is a moment of shadow work where they confront the part of themselves that equates love with self-sacrifice. This confrontation is painful, for it requires the empath to grieve not just the loss of the relationship, but the loss of the illusion that they could save another at the cost of themselves. Jung's idea of the collective unconscious reminds us that this struggle is not theirs alone. It echoes through generations, through myths and stories of heroes who must slay the dragon of their own fears to claim their true selves. The empath's boundary is their sword, and the dragon is the belief that their worth lies in how much they can give. For the narcissist, this moment is a crucible. The crumbling of their world is not merely a loss of control, but an invitation to face their own shadow. Jung believed that true growth comes from integrating the shadow, from embracing the parts of ourselves we reject. The narcissist's shadow is their vulnerability, their fear of being ordinary, unremarkable. When the empath sets a boundary, it forces the narcissist to confront this fear, to see that their grandeur is a hollow construct. Yet this confrontation is rarely immediate. The narcissist may double down, projecting their pain onto the empath, accusing them of betrayal or coldness. But beneath this defense lies a flicker of possibility, a chance to step into their own individuation, to begin the slow, painful work of building a self that does not rely on others' adoration. This dynamic, so deeply human, is a call to you as well. Where have you built your own masks, whether of giving or of grandeur? Where have you avoided the quiet truth of your own heart? The empath's boundary is a universal act, a reminder that true connection begins with the self. It is not about shutting others out, but about creating space for authentic presence. The narcissist's crumbling is not a punishment but a doorway, a chance to rebuild on a foundation of truth. In this dance of archetypes, the soul learns its own shape, and the world shifts ever so slightly toward wholeness. The ripple of the empath's boundary spreads further, stirring the air between them and the narcissist, like a sudden gust across a fragile house of cards. What was once a predictable rhythm, a cycle of giving and taking, of absorbing and demanding, now falters, its cadence broken. The empath, standing in the newfound clarity of their own limits, begins to see the world through a sharper lens. Their heart, once a vessel for others' pain, now beats with a quieter rhythm, one that whispers of self-preservation, of worth, not tethered to another's approval. This is no small shift. In Jungian terms, it is the alchemical process of differentiation, where the empath begins to untangle their identity from the collective, from the archetype of the martyr they have unknowingly embodied. The narcissist, meanwhile, feels the ground beneath their persona quake, their carefully curated image of invincibility, threatened by the empath's refusal to play their role. This moment of rupture is rich with psychological complexity. The empath's boundary is not just a line in the sand, it is a confrontation with their own shadow, the part of them that has equated love with self-erasure. Jung taught that the shadow holds not only our flaws, but our untapped strength, and for the empath, this strength is the courage to exist for themselves. To set a boundary is to risk rejection, to face the fear that their worth depends on their usefulness to others. Yet in this risk lies liberation. The empath begins to integrate their shadow, to see that their sensitivity is not a burden, but a gift, one that deserves protection. This is individuation in motion, the slow, sacred work of becoming whole, of claiming a self that stands apart, yet remains deeply connected to the human tapestry. For the narcissist, the boundary is a mirror they cannot avoid. Their ego, so dependent on the empath's validation, begins to fray at the edges. Jung's concept of projection is vivid here. The narcissist has cast their own insecurities onto the empath, using their devotion as a shield against their own unworthiness. When the empath withdraws, the projection collapses, and the narcissist is left to face the void within. This is not a gentle process. The narcissist may respond with fury, manipulation, or a desperate bid to regain control their actions, a frantic attempt to restore the illusion of their grandeur. Yet beneath this storm lies a deeper truth. The narcissist's crumbling is not merely a loss, but a call to their own shadow work. Jung believed that the shadow, when faced, becomes a source of transformation. The narcissist's vulnerability, so long denied, is the key to their own humanity if they dare to look. And what of you watching this unfold in the quiet of your own mind? Have you ever felt the tug of someone's need pulling you away from yourself? Have you ever built a wall of pride to hide a wound you couldn't name? The interplay of empath and narcissist is a universal drama, one that plays out in friendships, families, and loves. Attachment theory sheds light here. The empath's anxious need to connect, rooted in fear of abandonment, meets the narcissist's avoidant dance, their fear of intimacy cloaked in self-sufficiency. These patterns are not accidents, but echoes of the collective unconscious, where archetypes collide to teach us who we are. The empath's boundary is a lesson for you too, a reminder that your worth is not measured by how much you give, nor by how brightly you shine in another's eyes. The pain of this moment is undeniable. The empath may tremble with guilt, haunted by the narcissist's accusations or their own fear of being selfish. The narcissist, stripped of their mirror, may spiral into shame or rage, their ego lashing out to protect itself. Yet this pain is the crucible of growth. Jung's alchemy speaks of the nigredo, the dark night of the soul, where all must be broken down before it can be rebuilt. For the empath, this is the death of their old self, the one who lived for others. For the narcissist, it is the collapse of their false self, the persona they mistook for their soul. In this shared darkness, there is potential for the empath to rise as a sovereign being, for the narcissist to glimpse the possibility of authentic connection. This is not a story of heroes and villains, but of human souls caught in the dance of their own shadows. The empath's boundary is a spark, a moment of truth that illuminates the path to wholeness. It challenges you to ask, where have you given too much? Where have you demanded too much? The answers lie not in blame but in courage, the courage to face the self, to set the boundaries that honor your soul, and to trust that in doing so, you invite others to do the same. The air grows heavier now, charged with the weight of transformation. The empath's boundary, once a fragile line, has solidified into a sacred threshold, a declaration that their soul is no longer a currency to be spent on another's demands. This act, so simple yet so profound, reverberates through the psychic landscape, shaking the foundations of the narcissist's world. Where once the empath's light was a beacon for the narcissist's ego, now it shines inward, illuminating their own path. This is the essence of Jung's individuation, the journey toward wholeness, where the self is no longer defined by external mirrors, but by the quiet truth within. The empath, in their refusal to dissolve, becomes a living archetype of the hero not slaying dragons but facing the inner beast of self-betrayal. Yet this moment is fraught with tension. The narcissist, stripped of their accustomed supply, flails in the face of their own shadow. Jung's concept of the shadow is not merely a repository of flaws, but a wellspring of potential. And for the narcissist, this potential lies in their buried vulnerability. Their persona, that glittering mask of superiority, crumbles under the empath's boundary, revealing the fragile human beneath. This is no gentle unveiling. The narcissist may double down, wielding charm, guilt, or rage to pull the empath back into their orbit. Their ego, so long fed by control, recoils at the loss of its anchor. Yet in this resistance lies a paradox. The narcissist's struggle is not just a defense, but a cry from their deeper self, a plea to be seen beyond the facade they have mistaken for their identity. Consider this: what stirs in your heart when you imagine saying no to someone who has come to expect your yes? Do you feel the tremor of fear, the whisper of guilt that you are somehow betraying them? The empath's journey mirrors your own, for their boundary is a universal act of courage. It challenges the unspoken contracts we make with others, the ones that bind us to roles we never chose. Attachment theory weaves its thread here. The empath's anxious need to please, rooted in a fear of abandonment, collides with the narcissist's avoidant need to dominate, a shield against their fear of insignificance. These are not mere personality traits, but archetypal wounds drawn from the collective unconscious, where the human soul grapples with its longing for connection and its fear of losing itself. The empath's boundary, then, is a radical act of self-love, a refusal to let their wound define their worth. It is a moment of shadow work, where they confront the part of themselves that has equated love with sacrifice. This confrontation is not without cost. The empath may feel the ache of loneliness, the fear that their boundary will leave them isolated. Yet this is where Jung's wisdom shines. The path to wholeness requires solitude, not as punishment, but as a sacred space to meet the self. The empath begins to see their sensitivity not as a weakness, but as a strength, a gift that allows them to feel the world's pulse, yet one that must be guarded, not given away. For the narcissist, the boundary is a mirror they cannot shatter. Their crumbling is not just a loss of power, but an invitation to their own individuation. Jung's alchemy speaks of the rubedo, the reddening where the soul, having passed through the darkness of the nigredo, begins to integrate its fragmented parts. The narcissist's shadow, their vulnerability, their fear of being ordinary, holds the key to this integration. But this requires courage they may not yet have, for to face the shadow is to dismantle the ego's throne. The narcissist's rage or manipulation is a defense against this truth, but beneath it lies a flicker of possibility, the chance to build a self that does not rely on others' light. And what does this mean for you standing in the shadow of this story? Have you ever felt the pull to shrink yourself for another's comfort? Have you ever clung to a mask to avoid your own truth? The empath's boundary is a call to your own soul, a reminder that your worth is not a transaction. It asks you to look at the mirrors you've held up for others, the ones you've used to hide from yourself. The narcissist's crumbling is a warning too. To build a life on false foundations is to live in a house that will not stand. This dance of archetypes, so raw and human, invites you to step into your own power, to draw your own lines, to trust that in honoring your soul, you honor the world. The empath's boundary, now a steadfast wall, casts a long shadow across the fragile architecture of the narcissist's world. What was once a dance of mutual illusion, where the empath gave and the narcissist took, has become a reckoning, a moment where the archetypes of the collective unconscious stand in stark relief. The empath, in their refusal to be consumed, embodies Jung's vision of the individuated self, a soul no longer tethered to the expectations of others, but rooted in its own truth. This is not a rejection of connection, but a redefinition of it, a shift from sacrifice to sovereignty. The narcissist, meanwhile, flounders in the absence of their mirror, their ego's foundation eroding like sand beneath a relentless tide. Their world, built on the currency of admiration, begins to collapse, revealing the raw, unacknowledged vulnerability beneath. This collapse is not merely chaos, it is a crucible. Jung's concept of the shadow holds that our deepest wounds are also our greatest teachers. For the narcissist, the shadow is their fragility, the fear of insignificance they have buried beneath layers of grandiosity. The empath's boundary forces them to confront this shadow, to see that their worth cannot be borrowed from another's light. Yet this confrontation is a storm. The narcissist may lash out, their words sharp with blame, their actions a desperate bid to restore control. They may paint the empath as cruel, selfish, or ungrateful, projecting their own pain onto the one who dares to stand firm. But this is the ego's last stand, a futile attempt to preserve a persona that no longer serves. Beneath the surface, the narcissist's soul stirs, sensing the possibility of a truer self, if only they can bear the weight of their own humanity. For the empath, this moment is a trial by fire. Setting a boundary is not a single act, but a process, a repeated choice to honor the self in the face of guilt, fear, or doubt. The empath may tremble under the narcissist's accusations, their heart heavy with the old belief that love means giving until nothing remains. Yet this is where Jung's wisdom of individuation shines to become whole. The empath must embrace their shadow, the part of them that fears their own power, that equates self-care with betrayal. This shadow work is not gentle. It demands that the empath mourn the version of themselves who lived for others, who mistook self-sacrifice for virtue. It asks them to stand in the discomfort of their own worth, to trust that their sensitivity is a strength, not a liability. And what of you watching this unfold in the quiet corners of your soul? Have you ever felt the weight of another's expectations pressing you into a shape that isn't yours? Have you ever hidden your own pain behind a mask of strength or charm? The empath's boundary is a mirror for your own journey, a call to examine the places where you've given too much, where you've demanded too much. Attachment theory illuminates this. The empath's anxious need to please, rooted in a fear of being unlovable, meets the narcissist's avoidant need to control, a defense against their fear of being unseen. These are not just personal struggles, but archetypal ones, etched in the collective unconscious, where the human soul grapples with its longing for connection and its fear of losing itself. The beauty of this moment lies in its potential for transformation. The empath's boundary is not a wall to shut out the world, but a gate, allowing only what honors their soul to pass through. It is an act of love, not just for themselves, but for the narcissist, who is offered a chance to face their own truth. Jung's alchemy speaks of the Konjunktio, the sacred union of opposites, where the self integrates its light and shadow. For the empath, this is the union of their sensitivity and their strength. For the narcissist, it is the union of their grandeur and their vulnerability. This integration is not guaranteed. Many narcissists will flee from their shadow, clinging to their crumbling persona. But the possibility remains a seed buried in the rubble of their old self. This is your invitation too. Where have you let your boundaries blur, believing it was the price of love? Where have you built a facade to hide your own fears? The empath's courage, the narcissist's struggle. They are not distant stories, but reflections of your own soul's journey. To set a boundary is to claim your place in the world, to trust that your worth is not a transaction, but a truth. It is to step into the dance of archetypes with eyes wide open, knowing that every refusal, every crumbling mask is a step toward wholeness, not just for you, but for the world that mirrors your light. The empath's boundary, now a radiant line of selfhood, stands as a testament to their inner transformation, a beacon that no longer seeks to illuminate another's darkness at the cost of its own light. The narcissist, caught in the unraveling of their carefully constructed world, faces a moment of profound reckoning. Their ego, once a towering edifice, crumbles under the weight of the empath's refusal, exposing the raw, trembling core they have long denied. This is no mere conflict between two souls, but a mythic clash of archetypes drawn from the depths of Jung's collective unconscious, where the empath's wounded healer meets the narcissist's eternal child. In this sacred tension, the possibility of wholeness emerges, not just for them, but for the unseen threads that connect all human hearts. The empath's journey has been one of shadow work, a descent into the parts of themselves they once feared, the part that dares to prioritize their own needs, the part that refuses to equate love with self-erasure. Jung's concept of individuation is alive here, as the empath integrates their sensitivity with their strength, their compassion with their sovereignty. This integration is not a destination but a process, a daily choice to honor the self in the face of old habits and external pressures. The empath may still feel the echo of guilt, the lingering fear that their boundary will sever connection. Yet they begin to see that true connection does not demand their dissolution. It thrives in the space where two whole selves meet, each honoring their own truth. For the narcissist, the crumbling of their world is both a loss and an opportunity. Jung's shadow is not a punishment but a teacher, and the narcissist's shadow, their vulnerability, their fear of being ordinary, holds the key to their liberation. Yet this key is heavy, for it requires them to dismantle the persona they have mistaken for their soul. The narcissist may resist their ego, lashing out in a final bid for control, projecting their pain onto the empath, or retreating into a facade of indifference. But beneath this resistance lies a quiet stirring, a whisper from the deeper self that longs for authentic connection. Jung's alchemy speaks of the albedo, the whitening, where the soul, having faced its darkness, begins to glimpse its own light. For the narcissist, this is the possibility of a self built, not on admiration, but on truth, if they can find the courage to step into their own vulnerability. And what does this mean for you? Standing at the edge of this narrative, have you ever felt the ache of giving too much, of losing yourself in the act of loving? Have you ever hidden behind a mask, fearing that your true self would not be enough? The empath's boundary is a call to your own soul, a reminder that your worth is not a currency to be spent on another's approval. Attachment theory weaves its wisdom here. The empath's anxious need to please, the narcissist's avoidant need to dominate. These are not flaws but wounds, echoes of the human struggle to be seen and loved without losing oneself. The collective unconscious holds these stories, these archetypes, as mirrors for your own journey, asking you to look at the places where you've blurred your edges, where you've demanded too much or given too little. The beauty of this moment lies in its universality. The empath's boundary is not a rejection of love, but a redefinition of it, a shift from sacrifice to mutual respect. It is an act of faith, not just in themselves, but in the possibility of a world where connection is rooted in authenticity. The narcissist's crumbling, painful as it is not a punishment, but an invitation to rebuild, to create a self that can stand without leaning on another's light. This is the dance of the soul, where every boundary, every collapse is a step toward integration. Jung believed that the path to wholeness requires us to embrace both our light and our shadow, to weave them into a tapestry that is uniquely our own. This is the gift of the empath's courage, the narcissist's struggle, a reminder that you too are called to this work. To set a boundary is to claim your place in the world, to trust that your heart is enough. To face your shadow is to discover your strength, to find that your vulnerability is not a weakness, but a bridge to authentic connection. The individual who truly understands their depths extends that grace to the world,